Under the dim blue light of Horus 9, the cold winds moved across the empty plains like whispers from another world. A lone escape pod had fallen there hours ago, leaving a long trail of smoke and frozen dust behind. Inside the cracked metal shell, a human engineer named Ethan Ward tried to move his arm, but pain shot through his shoulder. The crash had nearly broken him. His suit's heater was fading and his breath turned into white mist. He pressed a weak signal button again and again, hoping someone in orbit would hear him. No one answered. The sky above him was silent and wide, filled with soft glowing clouds that moved like water. He pulled himself out of the pod, his boots sinking into powder like snow. The air was thin and tasted of metal. He saw strange light flickering in the distance, small orange dots moving slowly. At first he thought it was fire, but when the figures came closer, he realized they were not human soldiers or rescuers. They were tall, slender beings covered in fur-lined robes, with pale silver eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They moved with calm steps, their breath visible in the freezing air. Ethan raised his hands to show peace, though his fingers trembled from the cold. One of the aliens, smaller than the rest, stepped forward. Her voice was soft and broken, almost human. "Wanderer, hurt?" she asked carefully, using words that sounded old, like she had learned them long ago. Ethan could only nod. The young alien girl looked at the others and said something in her own tongue. Two of them lifted Ethan gently and carried him toward the glowing lights. As his vision blurred, he heard the wind hum through the valley. The last thing he saw before passing out was her face, calm, curious, and full of quiet worry. When he woke, he was lying on a bed made of soft animal fur. The air was warmer, and the scent of herbs filled the small stone hut. A dim fire flickered near the wall, and the same alien girl sat beside him, grinding herbs in a small bowl. Her skin had a faint silver glow under the light. She looked up as his eyes opened and smiled carefully. "You live," she said in simple words. "Lucky." Ethan tried to sit up, but pain shot through his ribs. "Where am I?" he asked weakly. She paused, searching for words. "Horus village," she said slowly, touching her chest. "My name, Leora." He repeated her name softly. It sounded musical, like wind through glass. Leora nodded and helped him drink from a clay cup. The liquid was warm and sweet, easing the tightness in his chest. Outside, he could hear the faint sound of others talking, their voices calm and low. Over the next few days, Ethan began to recover. He learned that Leora's people, the Solari, lived deep in the frozen valleys far from the old human mining zones. They had simple homes made of stone and cloth and used glowing crystal fires to stay warm. He was the first human they had seen in many years. Every evening, Leora brought him food, soup made from blue roots and dried meat, and stayed beside him while he rested. Sometimes they tried to talk. Her English was broken, but her tone was gentle. She asked many questions about stars, ships, and Earth. When he told her about cities and sunlight and rain that smelled like soil, she listened with wide eyes. Once, when he described oceans, she tilted her head and said softly, "We have no sea here. Only snow that never ends." On the fifth night, the air outside grew dangerously cold. The fire dimmed, and Ethan began to shiver even under the furs. Leora watched him silently for a while, then spoke in a quiet voice. "Cold too strong tonight," she said. "You die if alone." She moved closer, hesitating. "It is tradition to sleep close." For warmth, Ethan looked at her, unsure what to say. He saw sincerity in her glowing eyes. No hint of discomfort, only concern. The wind howled outside, shaking the door curtain. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said softly, "if it's your way." She lay beside him carefully, wrapping the heavy fur around them both. Her body felt cold at first, then slowly warm. Ethan could feel her heartbeat steady and soft. He tried to stay still, unsure if this was right, but exhaustion took him. As he drifted to sleep, he thought he heard her whisper something in her own language, a sound that carried both sadness and care. Hours later, the storm outside raged harder. Leora woke briefly and looked at the human beside her. His face was pale but peaceful now, his breath steady. She touched her hidden right arm under the blanket, feeling the old scar burn faintly. The mark reminded her of fire, metal, and screams from long ago, memories she had buried deep. Her eyes softened as she looked at him again. "He does not know," she whispered to herself. "Maybe it is better, outing days. You sleep much. Talk strange and dream," he smiled weakly, probably asking for coffee. She tilted her head, not understanding, but smiled anyway. The warmth of that simple smile made the small stone room feel less lonely. Over the next few days, Ethan began to walk again. His body still ached, but his strength was returning. Leora showed him the edge of the village, a cluster of rounded stone huts under hanging lanterns made of glowing crystals. Children played in the snow, leaving trails that sparkled like dust. The Solari people greeted Ethan with cautious curiosity. They kept a respectful distance, whispering to each other, their silver eyes filled with both wonder and old memories. Leora stayed close to him always. She was his translator, his guide, and his only bridge to this quiet world. When they walked through the market area, Ethan noticed that the people traded food, furs, and simple tools, but avoided anything made of metal. Even their cooking pots were made of stone. When he asked about it, Leora's face changed. Metal brings sorrow, she said slowly. Long ago, humans give us big machines. Then machines break. Many die, skyfire, noise. He could see the shadow in her eyes as she spoke. I'm sorry, Ethan said gently. That wasn't your fault. Leora looked at him for a long time before answering. You not same as them, she said. You different. That evening, Ethan worked on fixing his small transmitter near the fire. The device had cracked during the crash, and he hoped he could get a weak signal to orbit. Leora sat near him, weaving some cloth strips into a blanket. She watched quietly as he used his tools. When a spark jumped from the wire, she flinched, dropping her work. You okay? He asked. She nodded too fast. Yes, just memory. Ethan noticed the way she pulled her right arm back, hiding it under her robe. He hadn't seen it clearly before, but now, under the flicker of light, he caught a glimpse of something strange. Thin metallic lines running along her forearm, like faded burns or scars. What happened to your arm? He asked softly. Leora's hand froze. Her voice dropped. Old accident, she whispered. Nothing now. He didn't push further. The air between them grew heavy. Outside, the wind carried a low humming sound through the valley. Ethan kept working on his transmitter, pretending not to notice the way she hit her arm. But in his heart, he wondered what kind of pain she was really carrying. Later that night, the storm came again. The temperature fell fast, and snow began to hit the roof like soft drums. Leora came in with firewood and looked tired. Her silver hair was wet from the snow. She put more logs on the fire and sat near him. You try send message? She asked. Yeah, Ethan said, showing her the blinking red light. Still no signal. Something here blocks it. Maybe the mountains or some kind of field. She nodded quietly. Or a sky. Strange. It hid many things. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire. The sound of the storm outside was almost like voices whispering in the dark. Ethan looked at her hands, small, steady, but with that same scar peeking out from under her sleeve. He spoke gently. Leora, you don't have to tell me everything, but if something is hurting you, maybe I can help. She looked into the fire, her voice barely a whisper. Humans helped before, she said. Then humans leave. My mother say, trust slow, Ethan nodded. He understood that kind of pain, the kind that made you build walls around your heart. Then we go slow, he said quietly. No rush. For the first time, she smiled again, small but real. Slow is safe, she said softly. Days passed. Ethan helped the villagers fix broken tools and showed them how to make simple heating stones using crystal and wire. They were surprised by how gentle he was, how he never forced them to use metal again. Children followed him around, curious about his gadgets. Slowly, the villagers began to accept him. But every night, when he returned to his hut, he saw Leora sitting by the fire, staring into the flames as if searching for something lost. She still helped him, still smiled, but her eyes always carried that same distant sadness. One evening, as they prepared for sleep, he noticed her whispering something before lying down. What are you saying? He asked. Old words, she said quietly. To keep away dreams. Bad dreams? She nodded once. Of fire, of pain, of metal that sings too loud. Ethan didn't know what to say, so he just listened to the wind outside. One evening, as he returned from gathering supplies near the frozen stream, Leora met him halfway with excitement in her eyes. Her silver hair glowed faintly in the twilight. Ethan, she said, her voice light with energy. Tomorrow is Festival of Warmth, big day. All Solari come together. He smiled, curious. Festival of Warmth? Sounds important, she nodded eagerly. Very old. We celebrate when cold become longest. We share light food, songs. We remember. Before sadness time. The sadness time? He asked carefully. Leora's smile faded just a little. When humans and Solari stop being friends. She looked away toward the glowing horizon. But now, maybe story change again. That night, Ethan watched from his hut as the villagers began to prepare for the festival. They hung crystal lanterns along the pathways, each one glowing softly like captured stars. Children carved shapes in the snow, suns, hearts, and strange symbols that looked almost human. The air felt different, lighter, as if hope itself was moving through the cold. The next day, the festival began with the rising of the smaller sun. Everyone gathered in the center of the village. Fires burned in stone bowls, giving off blue and orange flames. The Solari sang songs in their own language, long, flowing sounds that echoed beautifully through the valley. Ethan stood beside Leora, feeling the warmth of the fire on his face. She handed him a piece of crystal bread, soft and warm. "You eat or cold eat you," she said with a playful smile. He laughed quietly and took a bite. It tasted sweet like honey mixed with snow. Around them, people laughed, danced slowly, and shared food. The moment felt peaceful, almost perfect. But as the sun set again, something shifted. The fires grew brighter, the music slower. The elder of the village, a tall Solari with white fur on his shoulders, stepped forward and raised a carved staff. The crowd fell silent. Leora's cheerful face softened, and she lowered her head in respect. The elder spoke in the Solari language for a long time, his deep voice echoing through the valley. When he finished, he turned toward Ethan and said a few words in broken English. "Long ago, humans bring light. Then fire take it away tonight. We remember both." Ethan stood still, feeling every eye on him. He nodded respectfully. "I understand," he said quietly. Leora touched his arm gently. "It's not blame," she whispered. "It's memory. We share warmth even with pain." As the night deepened, the fires were moved closer together. Families and friends gathered around them, wrapping themselves in furs. Leora guided Ethan toward her place near one of the largest fires. He noticed her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her eyes looked far away. "Always same feeling." "At this part, what part?" She took a slow breath. "When we remember those lost. When I was small, my mother sang to me this night. She say light can burn or heal. I did not understand then." Her voice cracked slightly, but she smiled again, trying to hide it. Ethan didn't know what to say, so he sat beside her quietly. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing the faint scar near her temple that he had never noticed before. It wasn't just her arm that had seen pain. It was her whole past. After a while, the elder began a slow chant. The villagers placed glowing stones in a circle and everyone moved closer together. Leora leaned toward Ethan and said softly, "Now we sleep close. Whole village. We keep each other alive." She spread a large fur blanket on the snow and sat down, motioning for him to sit beside her. The flames nearby painted the snow in colors of gold and blue. As the night wind grew colder, people lay side by side, forming a great circle of warmth. Ethan lay beside Leora, his heart strangely calm. Around them, the sound of breathing filled the air like music. Leora spoke quietly, her words almost lost in the wind. "This night means more than warmth. It means we are not alone. Even if past hurts, we still share the fire." He looked at her, seeing the sadness in her eyes again. "Leora," he whispered, "you don't have to hide your pain. You don't have to carry it alone." She didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed fixed on the fire. Finally, she said, "Pain keeps me remembering. If I forget, maybe same thing happen again." Ethan wanted to say more, but the elder began to sing again and the sound of the village joined him. The melody was haunting, gentle but filled with longing. Some of the words sounded almost human. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the rhythm vibrate through his chest. As the song faded, silence returned. Snow fell lightly over the sleeping villagers, melting as it touched their warm furs. Leora's hand brushed against his. Her skin was cold, trembling faintly. "You can sleep," she whispered. "Fire will guard you." But Ethan couldn't sleep right away. He looked at her again, noticing how tightly she held her blanket as if fighting something invisible. A tear slid down her cheek, catching the light of the fire. He pretended not to see it, letting her keep her secret for now. But in his heart, he made a silent promise. To learn what truly haunted her and to help her heal. even if it meant staying on this frozen world forever. As the twin moons rose higher, the fires dimmed slowly. The night was still except for the quiet breathing of hundreds of sleeping souls, and there among them, one human and one alien lay side by side, sharing warmth that was no longer just tradition. It was trust being born in the cold. The storm returned 3 days after the Festival of Warmth. Thick snow fell across the valley, hiding every path and making the village seem trapped under a white blanket. Ethan had started fixing the generator that powered the village lights, using spare pieces from his ship. He worked beside a stone wall, his breath fogging the air as he connected broken wires and replaced old fuses. Leora stood nearby, holding a lantern that glowed faint blue. Her face looked tired but peaceful. "You fix so many things," she said softly. "Maybe even Sky one day." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe, but first I need to fix this." He turned a small screw and sparks jumped out. The lights in the nearest huts flickered weakly. "Almost," he muttered. "Just needs more power." Leora tilted her head, watching him work. "You work like my mother," she said after a moment. Ethan paused, glancing at her. "Your mother was an engineer?" "She helped humans," Leora replied quietly. "Long ago, before bad times." That made Ethan look up. "You mean during the mining project?" Leora didn't answer right away. She placed the lantern on the ground and wrapped her arms around herself. Her silver eyes glowed softly against the dark snow. "Yes," she said at last. "Humans came here for crystal. They build big machines. My mother helped them. She say humans bring light and warmth. But then," her voice shook, "something happened. Fire came from ground. Machines broke. People screamed. Sky turned red." Ethan put down his tools slowly. The wind blew around them, carrying small flakes across his shoulders. "You were there?" he asked gently. Leora nodded. "I was small. I remember running. I remember my mother pushing me away when the big tower fell." She touched her right arm where the scars were hidden under her sleeve. "Metal cut me. Fire burned me. But my mother saved me. She didn't come back." Ethan's chest tightened. He looked down at the snow, feeling guilt even though he hadn't been there. "Leora, I'm so sorry." She shook her head. "You not the one who did it," she whispered. "But you remind me of her stories. She said one day humans will return, and maybe one of them will be kind again." The silence between them was heavy, filled with old memories and regret. Ethan turned back to the generator and connected the final wire. The machine hummed softly, then glowed with steady light. The nearby huts lit up one by one, their crystals shining like stars. Leora smiled through her tears. "You did it," she said quietly. Ethan wiped the snow from his face. "It's not much, but maybe it's a start." They walked back toward the main hall together. The elder met them by the fire, nodding with approval. "Human brings light again," he said slowly in English. "Old world maybe change." That night the wind outside grew even stronger. The walls shook and snow piled against the door. Inside the hut, the fire burned bright, casting long shadows across the walls. Ethan sat beside it, repairing a small communicator chip while Leora stirred soup in a clay pot. The warmth felt safe, but something about the silence outside made him uneasy. "Do storms last long here?" he asked. "Sometimes days, sometimes weeks," Leora said. "Oris does not like to let go of cold." He nodded. "It's like it holds its breath." Leora smiled a little, sitting across from him. "You speak like Solari now." They both laughed quietly. The moment felt gentle, but then Leora's expression grew serious again. "Ethan," she said softly, "there is something I must show you." She stood and opened the door just a little. The wind rushed in, cold and sharp. "Come," she said. "Bring light." Ethan followed her through the storm, the lantern flickering in his hand. They walked past the last huts through a narrow path that led toward the mountain cliffs. The snow was deep, but Leora moved as if she had walked this path many times before. After a while, they reached a cave hidden behind a wall of frozen ice. Leora brushed her hand across a symbol carved into the stone, the shape of a human hand beside a Solari symbol. "This place forbidden," she whispered. "But I come here sometimes." Ethan ducked inside. The air was still and cold, but faint lights shimmered along the walls. He looked around in surprise. The cave was full of old human equipment. Rusted machines, cracked helmets, broken tools, all half buried in ice. It was like a frozen memory of the mining camp that once existed. Leora walked ahead and touched one of the machines gently. This was my mother. Ours, she said. She said humans made mistakes, but not all were cruel. She wanted to fix things. But no one came back. Ethan moved closer, running his fingers across the old metal. It had the faded mark of the Earth Exploration Corps on it. So this is what happened, he murmured. A whole camp destroyed. And the story lost. Leora turned to him. Now you know why I hide my pain. I did not want to hate you, but sometimes when I see metal I remember. Ethan met her eyes, his voice soft. You've been carrying this alone for too long. She looked down. If I show my scars, others remember too. They will not forgive. He stepped closer, placing his hand gently over her shoulder. Then I'll help you remember differently. Maybe we can fix what was broken. Not just machines, but the trust too. Leora stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, small and trembling. Maybe you are reason she told me to wait. The wind howled outside the cave, but inside the air was calm. The old machines sat like sleeping giants, witnesses to a past full of loss. Ethan looked at the faded logo again and felt a strange spark of determination. I'll send a message to Earth, he said firmly. They need to know what happened here and what still lives here. Leora nodded slowly. If you send message, tell them. We still have warmth. You try again? She asked, her voice tired but calm. Ethan nodded, connecting the final wire. If this works, maybe I can reach the rescue ship. If not, he shrugged. We wait and hope, she smiled faintly. You always try. My people say hope is the warmest fire. Ethan chuckled softly. Then we better keep it burning. He pressed the switch. The small machine flickered to life, making a weak beeping sound before dying again. The light faded. Ethan sighed, leaning back against the wall. Leora moved closer and placed a hand on his arm. No light tonight, she said softly, but still warmth here. He looked at her, seeing the exhaustion in her face, and smiled. Yeah, you're right. The next morning, the blizzard grew stronger. The wind howled so loudly that it drowned all other sounds. Ethan went outside to check on the generator, but the storm nearly pushed him back. He could barely see through the wall of snow. Leora followed him, pulling her fur cloak tighter. Too strong, she called over the wind. You come back. But Ethan kept going. He reached the generator hut and saw that the power crystal had cracked from the cold. Without it, the village fires would fade within hours. He removed his glove and touched the control pad. Feeling the freezing metal burn his skin, he began working fast, replacing the parts with pieces from his ship's battery. Leora ran to him, her hair whipping around her face. Ethan, you freeze out here? He looked at her, snow clinging to his beard. If I stop, everyone freezes. His hands were shaking badly, but he kept working. The storm screamed louder, and the light on the generator flickered faintly. Then a sudden gust of wind tore through the air, knocking Leora off her feet. Ethan dropped the tool and rushed to her. She had fallen against a sharp stone, her right arm bleeding through her sleeve. The old scar had reopened. She tried to hide it, but the pain was too strong. Leora, Ethan shouted, lifting her carefully. Her body trembled in his arms. You're hurt! She shook her head weakly. It's nothing. You must finish. No, he said firmly. You come first. He wrapped her in his cloak and carried her back toward the huts. The snow cut against his face like knives, but he didn't stop. Each step felt heavier, but the thought of losing her gave him strength. When they reached the hut, he laid her by the fire. Her arm was bleeding where the metal mark showed again. He tore a strip from his shirt and wrapped it tightly. Stay still, he said quietly. She looked up at him, her voice faint. You always try to fix things, even people. Someone has to, he said with a small smile. You've done enough saving. My turn. Her eyes softened and a tear slid down her cheek. You are not like others, she whispered. You stay, I promised, he said. I'm not leaving. The wind outside roared again, but Ethan ignored it. He went back to the generator after making sure she was safe. His fingers were numb now, his face frozen, but he kept working until finally the machine came to life with a low hum. The village lights flickered and then burned brighter than before. When he returned, Leora was sitting up, the glow of the fire reflecting in her eyes. You did it, she said softly. Ethan sat beside her, too tired to speak. She gently placed her scarred hand over his. You bring light again. My people will remember. He shook his head slowly. I didn't do it alone. You guided me. She smiled faintly. No, Ethan. You showed us humans can still care. The storm continued outside, but inside the hut the warmth returned. Hours passed and Leora drifted into a light sleep. Ethan watched her, noticing how peaceful she looked even with the faint pain on her face. He could see the strength she carried, the quiet courage she never spoke about. When she woke again, she found him sitting by the fire, eyes half closed. "You should rest," she whispered. "I will," he said, smiling. "After I know you're okay." She reached out and touched his hand. "You already make me okay," she said softly. "When you came from the sky, I was afraid. But now when I look at you, I see not fear, but hope." Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. The fire crackled quietly between them. Outside, the storm began to weaken. The wind softened into a low sigh. The village was safe again because of Ethan's work. But more than the machines or the fires, something else had changed, something deeper. The people had begun to see him not as a stranger from the stars, but as one of them. The next day, as the first sunlight broke through the clouds, the elder came to the hut. He looked at Ethan and bowed slightly. "Human," he said slowly. "You stay when storm's strong. You bring light. You keep promise." Ethan stood and nodded. "I did what anyone should," the elder smiled. "Not anyone. Only heart that's still warm." Leora looked at Ethan with quiet pride. The scars on her arm still ached, but her heart felt lighter than ever. She whispered, "You said you would not leave." "And you didn't," Ethan smiled back. "Not now. Not until everything is fixed. You're for real this time." As the sun rose higher, the village shone bright under its twin light. The storm was gone, leaving a sky so clear it looked endless. And in that clear light, Ethan and Leora stood side by side. Two souls from different worlds bound by a promise, not of tradition or duty, but of trust and warmth that had survived even the coldest storm. The snow began to melt slowly as days passed. Streams of blue water ran between the huts, shining under the twin suns. The long winter was ending, and the villagers could finally walk outside without fear. Ethan stood near the repaired generator, checking the energy readings. The lights were stable now, stronger than before. The village had survived the harshest storm in years, and everyone knew it was because of him. Children waved at him as they passed, calling him Starman. He smiled each time and waved back. For the first time since his crash, he felt a strange peace inside. Leora came to him carrying a bowl of food. "You forget to eat again," she said with a gentle smile. Ethan laughed. "You sound like my sister used to." She tilted her head. "You have family on Earth?" "Yes," he said quietly. "A brother, a sister, and my mother. I don't know if they even know I'm alive." Leora placed the bowl in his hands. "They will know soon," she said softly. "You send message soon?" He nodded, looking toward the sky. "Yeah, soon." Every evening, Leora and Ethan worked together to repair the old communication tower outside the village. It stood half buried in ice, a tall metal shape that reached toward the clouds. Leora hated going near it. It reminded her of the machines that had caused the explosion long ago. But now she followed Ethan without fear. When she looked at him, the cold feeling in her chest faded a little. One night they worked late under the light of the twin moons. Ethan adjusted the power coil while Leora handed him tools. "This wire connects the base," he said. "Once the crystal stabilizes, we can send a signal to orbit." Leora watched the sparks jump from the wire and smiled softly. "You make fire from stone," she said. "You make light from cold." Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "You helped me. I couldn't have done any of this alone." She shook her head gently. "Maybe both of us needed to fix something. Me inside, you outside." They both laughed quietly, the sound soft under the stars. For a moment everything felt light, but then Leora's smile faded as she looked at the glowing machine. "When humans come again," she said slowly, "will they be kind?" Ethan put down his tools. "I can't promise what others will do," he said honestly, "but I can promise what I'll do. I'll make them listen. They need to know what happened here and what you've done to survive." Leora nodded, her eyes glistening under the moonlight. "Then I will trust your promise." A few days later, the villagers gathered for the closing of the Festival of Warmth, a tradition that marked the end of the long winter. The fire circles were lit again, but this time the songs were brighter. There was laughter, music, and even dance. The elder spoke in the old language, his voice filled with pride. When he finished, he turned to Ethan. "Human bring warmth again," he said slowly. "Now we share our song." The villagers began to sing together, their voices blending into a melody so pure that even the wind seemed to stop and listen. Ethan sat beside Leora, feeling the warmth of the fire touch his face. Leora looked at him shyly. "My mother used to sing this," she said. "It means light returns after darkness." Ethan smiled. "It's beautiful." As the music continued, some villagers began to dance around the fires, holding hands. Leora hesitated, then turned to him. "You know how to dance?" Ethan laughed. "Not really." She reached out her hand, smiling softly. "Then learn now." He hesitated, then took her hand. Her touch was light, almost trembling. They joined the slow circle around the fire, moving with the others. The air was filled with warmth and song. Leora's eyes met his for a long moment, and he saw something there, something fragile and bright like a new beginning. When the song ended, they sat near the fire again. Leora leaned closer and whispered, "You understand now why we sleep close?" Ethan looked at her, his voice soft. "Yes, it's not just for warmth. It's for trust," she smiled, "and for hope." The night went quiet. Around them, the last of the fires began to fade, leaving only glowing embers. Ethan leaned back, watching the sky. The stars above Orcs 9 looked different tonight, clearer and brighter. For the first time since he'd crashed, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The next morning, the tower flickered with power. The repaired transmitter hummed softly. Ethan stood beside it, heart pounding. "This is it," he said. "If this works, Earth will hear us." Leora watched him from a few steps away, her hands clasped tightly. "And if it not work?" He smiled gently. "Then I'll fix it again." He pressed the switch. The machine whirred, lights blinking one by one. A signal bar appeared on the small screen, weak but alive. Ethan's eyes widened. "It's working," he shouted. "We're transmitting!" Leora gasped softly, her eyes full of wonder. "You did it." He looked at her and shook his head. "We did it." For a moment, everything was still. The machine continued to hum, sending a message across the stars. "Survivor located. Friendly contact established. Peace possible." Leora smiled as tears formed in her eyes. "Your people will come," she said. "What will you do then?" Ethan looked at her, his voice quiet. "I don't know yet. Maybe I'll stay for a while longer. I want to make sure everything is right before I go." She nodded. "You already make many things right." The wind carried her words softly through the valley. The sky above was painted with morning light, soft blue turning to gold. The cold that had once seemed endless now felt gentle. That evening, when the stars appeared again, Ethan and Leora sat near the old fire circle. The others had gone to rest, leaving them alone. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he didn't move away. "You bring light," she whispered, not from sky, but from heart. He smiled faintly, looking at the stars. "You taught me what warmth really mean." Elder approached him slowly, his steps careful but proud. "The sky listens again," the elder said in his deep, slow voice. "You made it speak." Ethan shook his head humbly. "We made it speak. Without Leora and your people, I wouldn't have survived the first week." The elder smiled, placing a hand over his chest. "Orcs remembers who brings light, but it also remembers who shares it." Behind them, Leora stood silently. The twin suns shone behind her, giving her silver hair a golden edge. Her right arm was wrapped in clean cloth now, almost healed. She watched Ethan as if trying to memorize his every movement, afraid he might disappear. That night, the signal finally received an answer. A small green light blinked on the transmitter, confirmation from orbit. Ethan's heart raced. "They heard us," he whispered. "Earth heard us." Leora's eyes widened. "They come for you?" "Yes," he said softly. "They'll send a ship. Maybe in a few weeks." The room went silent. The fire crackled between them, its light warm and soft. Leora looked down at her hands. "So you leave soon," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe, but not yet." She didn't look up. "You have sky. We have snow. They are not same," he smiled sadly. "No, they're not. But both can be beautiful." Over the next few days, Ethan helped the villagers store supplies, repair roofs, and build a small wind barrier to protect the crystal fires. The Solari worked beside him with laughter and gratitude. Wherever he went, children followed, calling him the man who fixed the cold. But inside, Ethan couldn't shake the thought of leaving. The idea of going home, of seeing Earth again, felt strange now, almost distant. One evening, as the sky turned purple with the coming night, Leora met him near the frozen stream. The ice reflected the light of the twin moons, making the world glow like glass. She carried 2 small crystal cups and offered one to him. "Warm root tea," she said with a faint smile. Ethan took it, sipping carefully. It was sweet, with a taste like snow and honey. "This is good," he said. "It helps heart stay calm," she replied softly. They stood there for a while, watching their reflections in the ice. The wind moved gently, whispering through the trees. Leora finally broke the silence. "When I was small," she said, "I dream humans come again, but kind. My mother said dreams like stars. They take long to reach us." She looked at him with a small smile. "You took long time, Ethan Ward." He chuckled quietly. "Sorry for being late," she smiled, but her eyes glistened. "When ship comes, promise one thing." "Anything," he said. "Do not forget us," she whispered. "Do not let humans forget what happened here." Ethan looked at her, his voice steady. "I won't. I'll make sure they know this world is more than ice and minerals. It's home to people who understand warmth better than any human I've ever met." Her smile trembled. "Then my mother's dream is real." The night passed slowly. When morning came, the sky was clear and bright. A faint glimmer appeared far above the mountains, the signal flare from an approaching ship. Ethan's heart leaped and sank at the same time. It was his rescue, and yet it felt like losing something precious. The villagers gathered near the edge of the valley, watching the light in the sky grow stronger. The elder stepped forward and handed Ethan a small woven band made of silver threads. "Gift of Solari," he said, "to remind Skyman where he found warmth." Ethan accepted it with both hands, his eyes wet. "Thank you," he said softly. Leora stood beside him but said nothing. The wind moved her hair across her face and she brushed it back gently. "You will go," she said quietly. "But your light stays." "I'll come back," Ethan said. "I promise." She looked at him, uncertain but hopeful. "Humans forget fast." "Not this human," he said. As the ship descended slowly through the clouds, the sound of its engines filled the valley. Snow swirled in the air, shining like dust in the sunlight. Ethan turned to Leora one last time. "You saved me," he said softly. "Not just my life, my heart too." She smiled, though her eyes filled with tears. "You gave me back trust. We both fixed something broken." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of his ship's old metal plate, the same one that had carried his unit number. He pressed it into her hand. "Keep this. It's from my world." She looked down at it, closing her fingers around the cold metal. "And this," she said, touching her hand to her heart, "is from mine." The ship's doors opened and a voice called out from inside. Ethan took one last look at the village, the glowing fires, the blue snow, the gentle people who had taken him in. Then he looked at Leora, standing still in the wind, her eyes shining like twin stars. He stepped closer and whispered, "I'll find a way to make both our worlds meet again." She nodded. "Then our warmth will never end." As the engines rose and the ship lifted into the sky, Leora watched it disappear through the clouds. The villagers stood silently beside her, their hearts both proud and heavy. When the sound finally faded, she looked down at the piece of metal in her hand. The cold had already warmed from her touch. Days turned to weeks. Life in the village went on. The communication tower still hummed softly, carrying faint signals between two worlds. And sometimes, when the night was clear, a soft voice came through the static, Ethan's voice, sending small messages of progress, of peace, of connection. Each time it came, Leora would sit by the fire, close her eyes, and whisper back into the dark, "We still have warmth."